The tension in the lobby reached a boiling point as Michael stood frozen, his hand trembling around the room key. Sophia, with a smile plastered on her face, handed out keys to her friends, laughing like everything was normal. "Here's yours," she said, almost too casually, as if she hadn't just crushed his trust. Her friends mocked him openly, their laughter echoing off the marble walls, as Victoria smugly added, "We reserve rooms only for the elites." Michael's heart sank. This wasn't a vacation, it was a betrayal. The humiliation stung, but the silence that followed spoke louder than any words. This was the moment he knew everything had changed. But before we dive deep into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss our future stories. Michael Carter had built everything from the ground up. At 42, he was the definition of a self-made man. An entrepreneur who had turned a struggling tech startup into a thriving empire. He wasn't just wealthy, he was respected, admired, and known for his unwavering loyalty to those he loved. To the outside world, his life was perfect. He had the house, the cars, the business, and most importantly, a beautiful wife and 2 wonderful children. If anyone had asked, Michael would have confidently said that he had married the love of his life, Sophia Carter. Sophia, 39, was stunning, sophisticated, and effortlessly charming. She had the ability to command a room with just a smile, her presence magnetic, her confidence intoxicating. In social circles, she was adored, seen as the ideal wife, graceful, stylish, the perfect companion to a successful man. She curated their life like an art exhibit, ensuring that every dinner party, every charity gala, and every vacation appeared flawless. But Michael knew better. Behind closed doors, their marriage was far from the fairy tale it appeared to be. Over the years, Sophia had become increasingly distant, her affection dwindling into polite formalities, her conversations more about social events and designer brands than about their family. The warmth they once shared had been replaced by something colder, something transactional. Michael wasn't naive. He had noticed the way her eyes lit up at extravagant gatherings, but dimmed when they were alone. He had felt the growing emptiness, the subtle but undeniable shift in her priorities. What once felt like a partnership now felt like an arrangement. Despite the changes, he held on. For the kids, for the memories, for the hope that maybe, just maybe, she would come back to him. He reasoned with himself, convinced that all marriages had rough patches, that she was just caught up in the allure of high society. He had built a life for her, given her everything she could ever want. Surely deep down, she still loved him. So when Sophia suggested a vacation, Michael was taken aback. A getaway, just the 2 of them, a chance to reconnect, to leave behind the noise and distractions. "We need this, Michael," she had said, her hand grazing his arm, her voice softer than it had been in months. "Just you and me. No work, no stress, no responsibilities. Let's go somewhere beautiful, somewhere we can relax and remember why we fell in love in the first place." Michael had hesitated, not because he didn't want to go, but because something about it felt off. It wasn't like Sophia to crave alone time with him. Over the past few years, she had always found a reason to avoid it. Too many obligations, too many social events, too many excuses, and yet, here she was, suggesting a trip designed for reconnection. It should have been a good sign. It should have made him hopeful. Instead, it left an uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach, an instinctive warning that he couldn't quite ignore. But love makes fools of even the smartest men. He wanted to believe her, to believe in them, so he pushed aside the nagging doubt, silenced the voice in his head that told him to question, and smiled. "That sounds perfect," he had said, nodding, letting himself hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Sophia's face had lit up, her enthusiasm almost too eager. "I'll take care of everything," she had assured him. "The flights, the hotel, the itinerary, I want this to be special." And so Michael let her. He was always the one in control, the one making decisions, the one ensuring everything ran smoothly. For once, he told himself, he could let go, trust her to handle it. Maybe this was her way of making up for the distance, of showing she still cared. Maybe this was exactly what they needed. Or maybe he would soon realize it was something far more sinister. Michael stepped out of the airport, inhaling the crisp, salty air of the Caribbean. The drive to the resort was nothing short of breathtaking. Slush greenery, pristine beaches, and the sun casting golden hues over the ocean. This was exactly the kind of place meant to mend broken things. A paradise that could make 2 people fall in love again. He glanced at Sophia, who was glued to her phone, tapping away at the screen with an almost anxious energy. He expected her to look at him, maybe reach for his hand, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled at whatever was on her screen, her excitement seemingly reserved for something or someone else. Still, he pushed the thought aside, convincing himself that this was just her way of unwinding. Maybe she was coordinating last-minute details, making sure everything was perfect. After all, she had planned this trip. He needed to trust her. When they pulled up to the resort, Michael was genuinely impressed. The entrance was grand, towering white columns leading into a marble-floored lobby with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased an endless expanse of blue ocean. Everything screamed exclusivity, the kind of place where the rich and powerful came to disappear from the world. Sophia turned to him, eyes gleaming with excitement. "Isn't it perfect?" she asked, looping her arm through his. For the first time in a long while, she actually looked at him, smiled at him the way she used to. He felt the tension in his chest loosen, just a little. "Yeah," he admitted, "it's beautiful." Maybe, just maybe, this was the fresh start they needed. Then he heard a voice. High-pitched, overly enthusiastic. "Oh my God, Sophia, you made it!" Michael turned just in time to see three women striding toward them, dressed in designer resort wear, oversized sunglasses perched atop perfectly styled hair. Victoria, Ashley, and Natalie. Sophia's closest friends. The ones she spent every weekend with. The ones who always made him feel like an afterthought. Before he could react, Sophia had already pulled them into hugs, their excited chatter filling the lobby. "This place is insane," Victoria gushed, twirling in place. "Leave it to you, Soph, to pick the most exclusive spot." Ashley grinned, her gaze flicking toward Michael for the briefest moment before dismissing him entirely. "And first class, too. It's about time we all took a trip together." Michael's stomach tightened. A trip together? He turned to Sophia, his expression carefully neutral. "I thought this was a vacation for the two of us." Sophia laughed, lightly swatting his arm as if he had just said something amusing. "Oh, don't be silly, Michael. It's still our trip. I just thought it would be fun to bring the girls along. They needed a break, too." Something inside him shifted, but he forced himself to stay composed. This wasn't what they had discussed, not even close. But they were already here. He wasn't going to start a fight in the middle of the lobby. He reminded himself that maybe he was overreacting. Maybe this was just Sophia trying to make the trip more exciting. Then Victoria looped her arm through Sophia's and grinned at him. "Honestly, Michael, you should be thanking her. I mean, if she left this whole thing up to you, we'd probably be at some boring business retreat." Natalie giggled, shaking her head. "Right? You're lucky she knows how to have fun." The comment hit him like a slap, but he swallowed the sting and offered a tight smile. He had been funding Sophia's lavish lifestyle for years, and now here he was being ridiculed for it. As they made their way to the check-in desk, Sophia and her friends were in their own world, laughing, reminiscing about past trips, planning spa days and yacht excursions. Michael followed in silence, feeling more like a tag-along than a husband. Then came the moment that changed everything. The receptionist, a polite young woman in a crisp uniform, greeted them warmly. "Welcome to Ocean Pearl Resort. We have your party's rooms ready." Michael's brow furrowed. "Party?" The receptionist nodded, handing Sophia a set of keycards. "Yes, 4 suites have been booked under Mr. Carter's account." His stomach dropped. 4 suites? His account. Sophia took the keycards effortlessly, not even glancing at him. She handed one to Victoria, then Ashley, then Natalie. Finally, she turned to him and placed a single card in his palm. "Here's yours," she said casually. "I'll be staying with Victoria tonight. We have so much to catch up on." The room spun. He stared at the key in his hand, then back at her, waiting for some kind of punchline, some indication that this was a joke. But there was nothing, just her expectant gaze, as if she genuinely believed he wouldn't have an issue with this. His jaw tightened. "You're serious?" Victoria laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Oh, Michael, don't be dramatic. She needs her space. It's not a big deal." Ashley smirked, swirling the welcome drink in her hand. "We reserved rooms only for the elites." Natalie grinned. "Hope you don't mind the single bed, Michael." Laughter erupted around him, but all he could hear was the dull roar of betrayal pounding in his ears. The weight of realization settled over him like a crushing force. This trip was never for them. It was for them. He was nothing more than a wallet, a means to an end. Sophia hadn't planned this to fix their marriage. She had planned this to humiliate him. Michael's fingers tightened around the key card as he looked at Sophia, waiting for some sign of guilt, some flicker of remorse. There was none. She smiled, handing out luxury suite keys to her friends like a queen bestowing gifts upon her court, laughing at some inside joke he wasn't a part of. He realized then that he had never been a part of her world, just the one funding it. The reality hit him hard, like a slow-motion wreck he had seen coming but refused to acknowledge. His wife had orchestrated this entire trip not as a romantic getaway, but as a personal playground for her and her friends, all at his expense. She had lied to his face, looked him in the eye and told him this was about them, and all along he had been nothing more than a walking ace. The humiliation simmered inside him, clawing at his chest. He had built his life on logic, on control, on never letting emotions dictate his actions. But standing there, listening to them mock him, feeling the weight of her betrayal, it took every ounce of restraint not to explode. A younger version of himself might have caused a scene, might have demanded answers, might have begged for an explanation. But Michael was not a man who begged. He exhaled slowly, calm on the surface but boiling underneath. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. He wouldn't argue. He wouldn't fight for scraps of respect from people who had never given it to him in the first place. Instead, he did what Sophia never expected. He stayed silent. He nodded, pocketed the key, and turned on his heel without a word. The sound of their laughter followed him as he walked away. But he didn't let it break him. If they thought this was over, if they thought he would tolerate this, they had no idea what was coming. The moment he reached the other side of the lobby, he pulled out his phone and dialed the bank's emergency fraud line. When the representative answered, he kept his tone steady, professional. "I need to freeze all accounts under my name immediately, joint cards included. No additional transactions should be authorized without my approval." The representative hesitated. "Sir, this will restrict access to all secondary cardholders, including—" "I am fully aware," Michael interrupted. There was a pause, then the sound of keys clacking. "Understood, sir. The freeze is now in effect. Would you like me to report any attempts at future charges?" "Yes," he said coldly. "Every single one." Hanging up, he headed straight to the front desk. The same receptionist who had handed Sophia the keys looked up with a polite smile. "Mr. Carter, is there something I can assist you with?" "Yes," Michael said, his voice smooth as steel. "I need to cancel all remaining charges to my card, effective immediately. Anything pending? Decline it." She hesitated, glancing at her screen. "Sir, that includes—" "All of it." Her eyes flickered with surprise, but she nodded. "Understood, sir." Michael pulled out his wallet, slid his personal credit card across the counter, and said, "This will be used for my room only, nothing else." The moment the transaction went through, he pocketed his card and turned to leave, walking straight out the grand double doors of the resort. The humid night air hit him like a wave, but it felt clean, untainted by the venom Sophia had wrapped around him for years. He wasn't going to argue, he wasn't going to fight for her attention, and he damn sure wasn't going to sit there while she and her friends drank champagne at his expense. He had given Sophia everything, and tonight she would realize just how much she had lost. Morning came with a storm. Not the kind that rolled in from the ocean, but the kind that ripped through Sophia's carefully curated world with the force of reality crashing down. It started with a decline charge at the spa. Sophia had woken up, completely oblivious to the war Michael had already won, stretching luxuriously in her five-star suite, indulging in the fact that her husband was off sulking somewhere while she lived her best life. She had no regrets about how she had handled things. Michael needed to learn his place, and if he was too insecure to understand his role in their dynamic, that was his problem. Then the spa receptionist had politely but firmly handed her credit card back. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the payment has been declined." Sophia blinked, utterly confused. "Excuse me?" The woman offered a forced smile, clearly used to handling entitled guests. "Your card isn't processing. Do you have another form of payment?" Sophia laughed, shaking her head. "That's impossible. Just run it again." "We've already tried." Her stomach clenched, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Fine, use my other card." A few minutes later, the receptionist returned, looking noticeably less friendly. That one has also been declined. Sophia's smile froze. This wasn't possible. Her cards were all linked to Michael's accounts. There was no way there wasn't enough balance. There must be a mistake. My husband? And then it hit her. Michael. The realization slammed into her, sending a ripple of panic through her chest. No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't actually cut her off. Would he? Heart pounding, she grabbed her phone and dialed his number. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then went to voicemail. She tried again, straight to voicemail. Again, and again. Nothing. Victoria, lounging in the waiting area, glanced up from her magazine. What's wrong? Sophia slammed her phone down onto the counter, her nails digging into her palm. I think Michael did something to my accounts. Victoria raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, he froze them, she hissed, her perfectly curated composure beginning to crack. Ashley scoffed. Oh, please. Michael wouldn't do that. He's too much of a pushover. Sophia wanted to agree. He had never fought back before. He had always given in, always tried to please her, always let things slide. But deep down, she knew. Something had changed. And that's when the resort manager approached, his expression polite but firm. Mrs. Carter, I'm afraid we need to discuss the outstanding balance for your suite. A cold dread settled in her stomach as she turned to face him. Excuse me? The man cleared his throat. There were multiple declined transactions this morning. Your husband's account is no longer linked to any charges for this resort. We'll need an alternate form of payment. Sophia opened her mouth, then closed it, her throat tightening. She tried Michael again. Voicemail. Her hands trembled. The realization was suffocating. Michael hadn't just left the resort. He had left her? And for the first time in their marriage, she understood what true fear felt like. Michael sat in his hotel room, the ocean waves crashing outside, but all he could hear was the ringing in his ears. He had expected Sophia's betrayal. He had even prepared for it in his own way, but something still didn't sit right. The pieces weren't fully adding up. Her arrogance, her complete lack of fear that he would retaliate, the way she had orchestrated this entire trip with such precision, as if she were confident that he would accept whatever she threw at him. This wasn't just entitlement, this was something else. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through the contacts until he found the number. Mark Lawson, private investigator. Michael had worked with him years ago during a legal dispute for his business. Mark was the best at uncovering things people thought they had buried deep. Michael hit the call button, his voice cold and controlled when Mark picked up. I need you to look into something for me, discreetly. Within an hour, Mark had a lead. Your wife has been seeing someone, he said, his voice matter-of-fact. Michael's grip tightened around his phone. He had suspected, of course. A woman like Sophia didn't just lose interest in her husband overnight. She had replaced him in her mind long ago. He just hadn't seen it. Who? Michael asked, bracing himself. Mark sighed. Not who you'd expect. It's not another CEO, not some rich man from your circles. She's been having an affair with a resort concierge, a young guy, someone who works here. Michael blinked. He had prepared himself for a businessman, a wealthy socialite, someone who could match Sophia's hunger for luxury and status, but a concierge? You're sure? I don't speak unless I have proof, Mark said. I sent some images to your email. You might want to sit down. Michael opened his laptop, his pulse steady but his hands tight into fists, the images loaded one by one, grainy but undeniable. Sophia, slipping into a secluded villa late at night. Sophia, laughing, draping her arms around a man who couldn't be older than 28, and then the final blow. A transaction record, thousands of dollars funneled into a private account under his name. The same card she had been using all these years, the one Michael had so generously handed her. His money. His wealth had been funding her affair. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just a betrayal, this was a calculated violation of everything he had built. She had been stealing from him in the most humiliating way possible, spending his hard-earned success on a man who couldn't even afford the lifestyle she was accustomed to. Mark's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Michael, what do you want to do? Michael stared at the images, his heart steady, his mind already forming a plan. The old version of him would have confronted her immediately, would have demanded answers, would have yelled and thrown accusations. But the man he was now, the man she had created with her deceit, he would destroy her slowly, completely. "Send me everything," Michael said, his voice eerily calm. "I want every detail." Mark hesitated. "Are you sure? This could get ugly." Michael smirked, his first real smile in days. "It's already ugly, now it's just time for her to realize it." Michael sat in the resort's executive lounge, sipping his coffee, his expression unreadable as he watched the security cameras feed from his laptop. The resort's management had been more than accommodating when he informed them that a guest, his wife, had been committing financial fraud under his name. Money spoke louder than morality in places like this, and when he hinted at pressing charges for unauthorized transactions, the resort staff was eager to assist in handling the situation discreetly, or not so discreetly, depending on his request. He had no intention of keeping this private. A carefully constructed humiliation was the only way Sophia would understand what she had done. She thrived in the spotlight, fed off admiration, basked in the illusion of perfection she had built around herself. So Michael decided he would shatter that illusion in front of everyone. The lounge was packed with high-profile guests, wealthy vacationers, influencers documenting their lavish getaways, and of course, Sophia's friends, Victoria, Ashley, and Natalie, who were indulging in another round of overpriced champagne, oblivious to what was coming. Then the screens flickered, and the entire lounge went silent. At first it looked like a simple slideshow on the massive presentation screen at the center of the room. But as the first image appeared, whispers began. A picture of Sophia stepping out of a private villa late at night, wearing a silk robe, her hair tousled in the unmistakable way of someone who had just spent the night in another man's bed. Then, another photo. Her lover, a much younger man, holding the door open for her, his arm brushing against her waist. The murmurs turned into gasps as the next slide displayed text messages, the kind no wife should ever be sending to anyone but her husband. "Last night was amazing. I love the way you make me feel." Michael's so busy with work, he doesn't even care anymore. "But you're exciting." "I want you to take me somewhere nice this weekend. I'll handle the bill. Don't worry." Michael sat back, watching the chaos unfold. Victoria dropped her glass, the shatter ringing through the now silent lounge. Ashley covered her mouth, her eyes darting to where Sophia sat, frozen. Natalie blinked, her perfectly manicured fingers clutching the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Sophia stood abruptly, knocking over her chair, her face pale. "Michael," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper, but everyone was watching. "Oh, we're not done yet," Michael said smoothly, leaning forward as he nodded to the resort staff. The final blow hit the screen, a video. Sophia looking over her shoulder before slipping into the younger man's villa. The angle was perfect, the timestamp undeniable. Then another clip, inside the concierge office, the young man smirking as he swiped a resort card, confirming an unauthorized transaction under Michael's name. And just like that, the air in the room turned suffocatingly thick. Michael let the silence hang, let everyone soak in the truth, let Sophia feel the weight of their eyes on her, the way whispers turned to outright condemnation. A few guests stood up, giving her disgusted looks before walking away. The influencer couple by the bar was already recording, whispering, "This is insane. Did she really cheat on her husband and pay for her boy toy with his money?" Security arrived before Sophia could move. "Mrs. Carter," the resort manager said, his tone laced with forced politeness, "you need to come with us." Sophia turned, her eyes wide with panic, her perfectly composed world crumbling in real time. You can't do this," she stammered, looking at Michael for the first time with real fear. "Oh, but I can," Michael said, standing slowly, his presence towering over her as he walked past her, unbothered. "This is my name on the accounts, my money funding your little affair, and now, it's all gone." But Victoria, who had been Sophia's closest friend, now looked disgusted. "Oh my God, you were using him?" she whispered, stepping away as if even being near Sophia was tainting her. Ashley shook her head in disbelief, grabbing her purse. "You told us Michael was distant, but you never said you were screwing some hotel worker behind his back." Natalie crossed her arms, her lips curling in disdain. and you made us look stupid defending you." The three women who had once worshipped her now turned their backs, walking away. Sophia was truly alone now. Security escorted her out, and Michael followed just long enough to see her struggle as reality sank in. She wasn't the elite socialite she had pretended to be. She wasn't admired anymore. She was just another woman who had played a dangerous game and lost everything. Sophia stumbled out of the resort, her mind racing, her heart pounding so violently that she could barely hear the sounds of the ocean anymore. The murmurs, the judgmental stares, the security escorting her away. It all felt surreal, like some twisted nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found the one person she still had left. She hit dial, pacing furiously as the call rang. He didn't answer. Her stomach clenched, but she refused to believe he would abandon her now. Not him. He was supposed to be different. He had been the one thing in her life that still made sense. She called again. Voicemail. Her frustration boiled over as she hailed a taxi, shoving herself into the backseat, barely able to get the words out. "Take me to the employee quarters, now!" The drive was a blur, her mind replaying the humiliation over and over. The whispers, the gasps, the moment Michael had exposed everything. He had been so calm, so calculated, and she had never seen it coming. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Michael had never fought back before. He had always been the devoted husband, the provider, the man who tolerated her flaws because he loved her too much to leave. But he had left. He had left in the most excruciatingly public way possible, and now she had nothing. But she still had him. She repeated it to herself as the taxi pulled up to the staff apartments behind the resort. She stepped out, wrapping her arms around herself, her once perfectly styled hair now a mess, her dress wrinkled from the chaos of the morning. She forced her way inside, heading straight to his door, knocking rapidly. "Ethan, open up!" The door cracked open, and there he stood, the man she had risked everything for, the man she had spent Michael's money on, lavishing him with gifts, taking him to private resorts, treating him like a king while her husband worked to provide for her lifestyle. Ethan barely looked at her before sighing, rubbing the back of his neck. "What are you doing here?" "Sophia." Sophia pushed inside, her voice desperate. "Did you hear what happened, Michael? He cut me off. He exposed everything. I need you, Ethan. We have to figure this out." Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "We," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the word, deciding whether or not he liked it. "Yes, you and me. We knew this day would come eventually, right? Michael was never going to be blind forever, but now that it's out in the open, we can stop sneaking around. We can actually be together." She reached for him, expecting comfort, expecting something, but he stepped back, dodging her touch effortlessly. Sophia's stomach twisted. "Ethan?" He sighed, shaking his head. "You really thought this was real?" His voice was almost amused, but there was something even worse behind it. Indifference. Sophia froze, her mouth opening, but no words came out. Ethan exhaled, pushing off the counter. "Come on, Sophia, you think I actually loved you? You were an easy payday, a rich, lonely housewife throwing money at me to feel young again. It was fun, sure, but real? No, I was never going to stick around for this." She shook her head violently, as if doing so would erase what he just said, make it not real. "You're lying." Ethan smirked, stepping closer, his voice mockingly soft. "Am I?" He pulled out his phone, tapping a few times before turning the screen toward her. It was a message thread, his messages with another woman. "She's getting way too attached. Yeah, she thinks we're in love. It's pathetic. I'll milk this a little longer, but I'm not stupid enough to stick around when she loses access to the money." Sophia stared, unable to breathe, her entire body going numb. She tried to speak, to form a sentence, to demand an explanation, but there was nothing left to say. Ethan shrugged, tossing his phone onto the counter. "I mean, it was fun while it lasted. But you don't seriously expect me to take care of you now, do you?" He let out a short, humorless laugh. "You spent years looking down on your husband, treating him like he was just some boring paycheck, and now you're here, expecting me to do what? Rescue you? Be your knight in shining armor?" Sophia's throat burned, tears stinging her eyes. I gave you everything." Ethan's expression finally shifted, but not into regret, into boredom. "Yeah, and now you have nothing left to give, so why are you still here?" Her breath hitched. He walked past her, opened the door, and gestured toward it. "Go." The finality in his voice shattered what little pride she had left. Sophia Carter, once the queen of luxury, once the wife of one of the most powerful men she knew, once untouchable in her world of privilege, was now standing in the hallway of a low-rent employee apartment, broke, abandoned, and utterly alone. She had no friends, no money, no one left to save her. Sophia walked out of Ethan's apartment in a daze, her body moving on autopilot while her mind refused to accept what had just happened. She had convinced herself that no matter what, she wouldn't be alone. But now she was standing under the blistering afternoon sun, with nowhere to go, no money, no security. The moment she reached for her phone, reality slammed into her like a freight train. She had no access to her accounts, no credit cards, no lifeline. She tried calling Victoria first, then Ashley, then Natalie. Each call went straight to voicemail. She sent frantic texts, desperate for even a sliver of support. "Sophia, please call me back. I need help. Sophia, this isn't what you think. I need to explain." The messages sat there, unread. The silence was suffocating. She opened social media, her hands trembling. Her name was everywhere. The scandal had already spread beyond the resort. A leaked video of her disgrace, the screenshots, the humiliation, all of it was being shared like some twisted entertainment. One post stood out. "Imagine cheating on your millionaire husband with a broke hotel worker and then getting dumped by both. Karma at its finest." Her stomach churned. The comments were even worse. People who had once envied her life, admired her beauty, wanted to be her, now mocked her like she was nothing. She scrolled through endless messages, old acquaintances distancing themselves one by one. "Ashley, I can't believe you, Sophia. Don't contact me again. Natalie, you lied to all of us. You made us look like fools defending you." Even Victoria, her closest friend, had turned against her. "Victoria, you deserve everything that's happening to you." Sophia dropped her phone, bile rising in her throat. They had abandoned her instantly, without hesitation. For the first time in her life, she had no one. Hours passed in a blur. She found herself in front of her sister's small, run-down apartment on the other side of town. Jessica opened the door, eyes widening in shock. They hadn't spoken much in recent years. Sophia had made sure of that. Jessica was a teacher, a single mother, a woman who had built her life on hard work and responsibility. The complete opposite of Sophia. Sophia swallowed her pride, her voice small. "Can I stay here?" Jessica leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You have some nerve showing up here now." "I don't have anywhere else to go," Sophia admitted, her voice breaking. Jessica let out a sharp breath. "You made your choices, Sophia. You burned every bridge. And now you think you can just show up and I'll fix everything?" Sophia didn't have a response. Jessica sighed, rubbing her temples. "You can stay in the spare room, but don't expect me to clean up your mess." Sophia nodded, stepping inside. The place was small, cramped, a far cry from the lavish mansions and penthouses she had once called home. The guest room had a twin bed, a cheap dresser, and no closet space. It smelled like detergent and childhood memories she had long since discarded. That first night she lay awake staring at the ceiling, haunted by the life she had lost. The next morning, Jessica threw a pile of laundry in front of her. "If you're staying here, you're helping." Sophia's hands clenched. She had never washed her own clothes before, never cooked her own meals, never lived without luxury. The reality of living like everyone else, of having to fend for herself, was unbearable. She spent the next few days calling everyone she could think of, but no one answered. She tried applying for a new credit card, but the banks denied her. She had no assets, no income, no husband to vouch for her anymore. Then, out of pure desperation, she did what she swore she would never do. She called Michael. The line rang. In ring. Then went to voicemail. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. A text popped up from an unknown number. "This number is no longer in service for you. Do not contact me again." Sophia's hands went cold. Michael had cut her off completely? For the first time since this nightmare had begun, she truly understood what it meant to be powerless. Michael sat in his lawyer's office, the faint hum of the city outside a stark contrast to the calm, methodical destruction he was about to finalize. Across from him, Rebecca, his attorney, scrolled through the last few pages of the divorce settlement, her expression unreadable. "Everything is in place," she said, looking up at him. "Sophia has no legal ground to contest this. She signed a prenuptial agreement years ago. Given the financial fraud, infidelity, and abandonment of marital duties, she walks away with nothing." Michael nodded, his expression cold, detached. "And the kids?" Rebecca's lips pressed into a firm line. "Sophia hasn't even attempted to reach out to them since all of this went public. Between that, her financial instability, and her lack of a permanent residence, she has no case for custody. Full custody will be granted to you." Michael exhaled slowly, letting the weight of that realization settle. He had spent years shielding his children from the cracks in his marriage, from the emptiness behind Sophia's picture-perfect exterior. He had given her every chance to be the mother they deserved, and she had chosen instead to live a fantasy that had now crumbled around her. Rebecca slid the papers toward him. "Just sign and it's done." Michael picked up the pen, his movement steady. He didn't hesitate. With each signature, he severed the last remaining ties between himself and the woman who had once promised forever. The woman who had humiliated him, stolen from him, and treated him as nothing more than a provider. He finished, setting the pen down with finality. "File it immediately." Rebecca nodded. "It'll be official by the end of the week. She'll be served the papers soon." Michael stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Make sure she understands that any further contact is unwelcome. If she tries anything, I want a restraining order ready to go." Rebecca smirked. "Something tells me she won't be in a position to fight this. She's barely staying afloat." Michael didn't care. She was no longer his problem. As he walked out of the office, the weight that had once suffocated him was gone. No more lies, no more betrayals, no more Sophia. All that remained was his future, his children, and a life finally free from the woman who had done everything in her power to ruin him. She had taken him for granted. She had thought he would never walk away. But now, she was nothing more than a chapter he had closed for good. Michael woke up to the sound of laughter echoing through his home. Real, genuine laughter. His children, Emma and Jake, were chasing each other through the living room, their joy filling the house in a way he hadn't heard in years. It had been months since Sophia had been served the divorce papers, months since he had cut her out of his life completely, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly free. His focus shifted entirely to his business and his children, two things that had always been constants in his life but had been overshadowed by the chaos of his toxic marriage. Without Sophia draining his energy, his company thrived even more than before. He made smarter investments, took on bigger projects, and even found time for himself, something he had long neglected. But his greatest victory wasn't in boardrooms or balance sheets. It was at home. Emma no longer tiptoed around the house, afraid of setting off her mother's sharp tongue. Jake had started opening up again, no longer buried in his video games to escape the tension that had once suffocated their family. They had family dinners filled with conversation. They played board games on weekends, and on Sunday mornings Michael made pancakes from scratch, a tradition he had let slip away over the years. One evening, after helping Jake with his math homework, Michael sat back and watched his kids argue over what movie to watch. This was what mattered. Not the money, not the status, not the perfect social image Sophia had chased her whole life. This was real. This was love. And then, without even looking for it, love found him. Michael met Emily at a bookstore, of all places. Something so ordinary, so simple, but it changed everything. She was 35, kind, intelligent, and effortlessly warm, a woman who radiated a quiet confidence that came not from money or appearances, but from who she was as a person. Their first conversation had been about classic literature, something he hadn't talked about since college. She had laughed at one of his dry jokes, the kind that used to go unnoticed with Sophia, and he had realized how much he missed, being seen, being appreciated for who he was, not just for what he could provide. Emily wasn't impressed by his wealth or his status. She cared about him, his thoughts, his dreams, his children. She asked questions about Emma and Jake, about his favorite childhood memories. about who he was beyond the businessman, beyond the man who had been betrayed. Their relationship grew organically, without manipulation, without games. For the first time in years, Michael wasn't walking on eggshells, wasn't second-guessing every interaction, wasn't bracing for the next storm. With Emily, there was trust, respect, and peace. When she met his kids, she didn't try to replace their mother, didn't force herself into their lives. She simply showed up, with patience, kindness, and understanding, letting them set the pace. Emma, hesitant at first, warmed up to her after they spent an afternoon baking together. Jake, ever the skeptic, had finally accepted her when she sat through an entire 3-hour-long superhero movie without once checking her phone. One evening, as Michael and Emily sat on the porch watching the sunset while Emma and Jake played in the yard, she turned to him and asked softly, "Are you happy?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in his life, he didn't hesitate to answer. "Yes," he said, and he meant it. But just when he thought he had left the past behind, it came knocking one last time. It started with a missed call, then another, then a message. "Sophia, I need to talk to you." Michael stared at the screen, feeling nothing. No anger, no longing, no regret. Just emptiness. When she called again, he finally answered. Her voice was different, shaky, raw, devoid of the arrogance that had once defined her. "Michael, please don't hang up." He waited. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she whispered, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he believed her. She had been completely destroyed by the life she had once worshipped. No money, no friends, no status, and worst of all, no family. She had tried to claw her way back into society, but the same people who once fawned over her had turned their backs without hesitation. She was nothing to them now. Tears choked her voice as she continued. "I lost everything, Michael. I lost you. I lost our kids, and I deserve it. I just need you to know I regret everything." Michael closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. This was what he had once desperately wanted to hear, but now it didn't matter. "I forgive you, Sophia," he said finally, his voice calm, "but forgiveness doesn't mean taking you back." A broken sob escaped her. "I know." For a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. Then, Sophia spoke one last time. Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" Michael's heart tightened, but he refused to let pity cloud the truth. "That's not up to me," he said simply. "That's up to them." And with that, he hung up. As he turned back toward the house, Emily stood at the doorway, watching him carefully. He walked to her, took her hand, and squeezed it. "You okay?" she asked softly. He smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Yeah, I think I finally am." Inside, Emma and Jake laughed over some ridiculous joke, their voices filling the space that had once been so cold, so empty. Michael took one last look at the life he had left behind and then stepped forward, into the future he had built for himself. No more pain. No more betrayal. Just love, peace, and freedom. Michael sat on the soft grass, leaning back on his elbows as he watched Emma and Jake chase each other across the park, their laughter ringing through the crisp afternoon air. Emily sat beside him, handing him a sandwich from the picnic basket with an easy smile. The sun cast a golden glow over the lake, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Michael felt completely at peace. There was no tension, no worry about being manipulated or belittled. He had everything he needed. His kids, a woman who truly valued him, and a life that was his to live on his own terms. The wounds from Sophia's betrayal had healed, leaving only lessons that had made him stronger. He had once thought revenge meant getting even, making her suffer as he had suffered. But now, sitting here, surrounded by love and laughter, he understood something far greater. The best revenge was living well. Sophia, on the other hand, had no one left. Her social exile had been swift and brutal. The people who once flocked to her, praised her, envied her lifestyle, had discarded her the moment her status crumbled. She had tried everything to regain her place in the world she once ruled, calling old friends, begging for opportunities, even attempting to spin her downfall as a growth experience, but no one cared. She was forced to face the brutal reality of her own choices. She had destroyed her marriage, betrayed the only man who had ever truly loved her, and now she had nothing to show for it. No more first-class vacations, no luxury spa days, no expensive designer bags. No family, no love, no respect. She lived in a tiny apartment, working a job that barely covered her bills, looking in the mirror each morning and seeing a stranger, a woman who had traded everything for a fleeting fantasy and lost it all. And worst of all, Michael never looked back. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you do if your spouse treated you like this? Have you ever been betrayed like Michael? How did you handle it? What's the most valuable lesson you've learned about trust in relationships? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading every single one. When someone shows you that they don't respect you, believe them. Don't beg for love. Walk away, reclaim your power, and build a life that they will regret losing. True strength is knowing when to let go and never looking back. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of courage and change. Every story we share is a reminder that self-respect, resilience, and knowing your worth are the true keys to happiness. If you've ever faced betrayal, heartbreak, or a tough decision in life, remember, you have the power to rise above, rebuild, and thrive. Your voice matters. Your strength matters. Together, we can create a world where everyone's dignity is recognized and respected. Turn your pain into power. Live well, love wisely, and never settle for less than you deserve. Now tell me, what's your story? Share it in the comments and let's build a community of strength and support. More powerful stories are coming, so hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.